Well, Peter, we'd like to hear a little bit about your impressions of post 97
Mm.
Hong Kong.
Okay. Well, 97 proved to be a watershed in my life because I had emigrated to Canada in 95 and things were not working out. But I was invited to come back and write a history of Hong Kong by the South China Morning Post, of all people. They paid me very handsomely for it. I wrote the history. It came awry because Sir Percy Craddock was on the board of the South China Morning Post, and he took exception to one or two of the things I said. I had about a 10-page memorandum from him of things that he wanted me to correct, which I did. Most of it was itty-bitty stuff, and it was easy to do. But the sticking point was the fact that he denied that John Major had been unhappy with the results of his visit to Beijing in 1991 to seal the airport discussions. And he denied that John Major had made the decision on the flight back to London that he was going to replace Sir David Wilson. And he wanted me to say that Sir John Major had expressed extreme satisfaction with his visit, and that he hadn't at that stage decided he was going to have a change of governor. So I said, that's great. I'd like to quote you on that because nobody knew that. And I'd like to say that you were on board the plane and this is what you heard. And he wouldn't let me do that. He said, no, I want you to say that. And I said, how could I say that? I wasn't on the plane. I wasn't part of that discussion. How could I fly in the face of popular perception by saying that John Major was terribly happy with his visit to Beijing? So I wouldn't retract my statement, and he wouldn't allow me to. The South China Morning Post caved in and shelved the history. I have to say they paid me very satisfactorily for it, and I'm no quibble with that. But I also am grateful to them for giving me the realization that there was still life left in me. I came back to Hong Kong, and 4 major publications wanted me to write books for them. They thought I'd removed myself from the scene. They wanted me to write a book about the handover, which I did. And I think I managed to complete the text in a couple of weeks, and the thing was on the market within days of the handover taking place. And they were happy with the results and wanted me to go on writing books. So I came back with there's life after retirement after all. And I settled back in Hong Kong. And I found after 97 that things had changed for the better. The reason for this was that suddenly the expat population, who had been perceived as, living in ivory towers, completely ignorant of the processes of thought that the general public had. And they realized that those who were hanging on in Hong Kong actually loved Hong Kong for what it was. And they accepted us. I was living in a fairly middle-class residential estate in Tuen Mun, surrounded by, middle-class Chinese, working-class Chinese, who bought their own flats and, living their very Hong Kong lifestyle. And I was very much accepted. The fact that I was expat no longer seemed to matter. I wasn't living in an ivory tower. They realized I was an ordinary human being like they were. So I felt I belonged for the first time. I had a sense of belonging. And I found that Hong Kong people were very, very public-spirited. If you ran into trouble, they would be the first people to help you. I had an example of this in the Sham Shui Po shopping centre, the golden
Shopping arcade.
shopping arcade. I was in the basement, congratulating myself on some software that I'd acquired, probably illegally, because it was in those days. And I didn't see where I was going. It was a fairly low ceiling. I bumped into one of those beams, and I was just annoyed that I felt a bit dazed, and I was happy to carry on. But I found blood streaming down my face, and I was pursued by shopkeepers who thought, "Oh my God, this guy is hurt. Sit him down. Bring him a cup of coffee. Or call for the ambulance." And I was saying, no, I'm perfectly all right, you know. No, they wanted me off by ambulance, and they were all around me, mopping my head, and I thought, all these strangers, and they're so concerned about me. I'd never had anything like that happen before, and I thought, this is a new spirit in Hong Kong. And another example is my dear friend Aileen Bridgewater, with whom I'm staying at the moment, was driving into town along the Tolo Highway, and she had a puncture. And she'd never been taught how to deal with a puncture. So there she was, standing helplessly by the roadside. 3 taxi drivers stopped in quick succession. They had her wheel off in minutes. They replaced it. They sent her on their way. She wanted to reward them. She wanted to pay them for the trouble they'd taken. They would have none of that. And I thought, this is a new Hong Kong. And I actually felt better about Hong Kong. I had realized that I'd lived a separate existence before 97, in my earlier civil service years. I was part of that small enclave of civil servants who was seen as not really belonging. But after 97, we were belongers. Things changed. Yeah. So that was the big difference I noticed. That the Chinese had kept their word, that the PLA were almost invisible. You'd hardly know they were here. Instead of rolling in with tanks and, jackboots in the streets, you weren't aware of their presence. You actually had to go out of your way to catch sight of one. I was in Stanley, and we drove out to the end of the peninsula where the PLA base is, and I was about to turn around the car around, and I saw this PLA guard on duty, and a stray dog came ambling up to him, and I thought he'd boot it out of the way or something, but no, he stooped and patted the dog. And I thought, wow, I wish I had a camera. It would make such a fantastic image, a PLA soldier, instead of being stern and bullying, is kind enough to take care of a stray dog. And that was great. I mean, I thought the Chinese had kept their hands off. They stuck to their word. But I think there's a limit to how far they will stand back and allow freedom of speech to keep gnawing away at everything they're trying to do. I am really worried about this Occupy Central movement that's brewing. I think that's going to be stretching the limit. I think that will be the last straw for the Chinese. They will say, enough is enough. You can't paralyze a city just to make a point, for heaven's sakes. And what worries me is that these politicians don't realize the danger they're running. They think they're just going to force China to concede. Not a bit of it. China's not going to back down and be bullied into granting, democracy before its due date. This is ridiculous. I'm very worried about that. I think it could do a lot of harm to